everybody. We are in Florida, in Jacksonville, in the United States, and today we are going to visit one historic place. Everybody knows about slavery in the United States, and everybody knows that in the beginning of the 16th century, millions of African people were kidnapped, enslaved, and shipped across the Atlantic to the North and South America and the Caribbeans. Almost 2 million people died at sea during that journey. Many plantations were on the south of the United States, and today we are going to visit the Kingsley Plantation in Florida on Fort George Island. The Kingsley Plantation was named after the developer and most famous owner, Zephaniah, I don't know which way is right, Kingsley, who spent 25 years there. Slave labor was performed according to the task system. This means each slave were given some task for a day, and when they finish it, they were free of work for today and they could do whatever they wanted. But if there was a harvest time, this means they worked for during 15 or 16 hours a day. Slaves had gardens like this one, and you can see this garden on the map. So when they finished their tasks on the plantation, they could work on their garden, and they had one free day in the spring to plant their gardens, and in the autumn to harvest their own crop.
Grew cotton here. Principal crop was cotton, but they also grew indigo and sugar cane. They grew okra, sugar cane, indigo, which was used to make dyes. And potatoes is what they ate a lot of.
It is the owner of the plantation house, of course. It is how it looked before.
Okay, this is interesting. Come here. The plantations of those days usually had a separate building for the kitchen because there was no air conditioning, of course, and the heat of the kitchen they tried to keep that as far away from the house as they could. And also, I guess, for fires too, because if a fire started, you could control it better if it was keep it from going to the main house. So this was the kitchen building here. And up ahead of us, you see the main house. One other thing before we go to the main house. Look up there at the top. See that little walkway up there?
Uh-huh.
All right. This house was not owned by a sea captain. This was a plantation. But in New England of its time, up in the northeastern United States, where that came from, that was called a widow's walk. And the idea was that the wife of the sea captain, while he was out at sea, would be able to go up there and watch for him to come home, because this was the river right out here, and so this goes straight to the Atlantic Ocean. So you could come from the Atlantic right up to this plantation. So this house had a widow's walk. You could get up there and would have a great view of the approach to the house from the sea.
The most horrible sin. Huh.
Yeah, I know, honey. Lots of stuff in the U.S. these days about the horrors of slavery. I know. The owner of this plantation, Mr. Kingsley, had a number of slaves. One of them was Anna, and he actually married Anna. He freed her. He married her. She became a free black person in the South named Anna Kingsley, and she actually owned slaves, and she was the wife of Zephaniah Kingsley, who was the man who created this plantation.
And she is from Senegal, Africa.
Yes.
And probably she lived in the house like this in Senegal.
Exactly.
Actually, Anna was not from the poor family from Senegal. She was a daughter of a king of Jollof area in Republic of Senegal, and she was a princess and brought to the United States. And like you heard, she became a wife of the owner of the Kingsley Plantation, and only in 200 years her family in Senegal learned what happened to her here in the United States.
This house was constructed in 1798.
1798.
The oldest plantation house in Florida.
And the house is basically the original structure, but there were some additions made in the 1800s, late 1800s, including those two rooms over there and the 3 bay window rooms, and then they brought the staircase from the outside to the inside.
It's a beautiful house. I wouldn't mind living here now.
I don't know. It feels almost kind of creepy walking around sometimes.
You think?
Yeah, and I know it's just because the wood is settling sometimes where no one will
Pops
be in the
and
house that you
groans.
hear it, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I
can
mean,
imagine.
Even our visitor center, it was built in the 1930s, and none of the rangers or anybody like smokes cigarettes or anything like that, but our volunteer that lives over there said that she smelled like cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it was an Army-Navy lodge, like there's probably still some lingering cigar smoke in there, you know?
That's funny. we're getting ready to go to a building, and I'm not sure what it is, but there were a lot of people on plantations in those days, and so many of the plantations had their own church. And I have a feeling this might be the plantation church that we're going to. But anyway, it says, let's read what it says. It says, imagine, instead of the lush green landscape of today, a long dusty road stretches to the slave cabins and the fields beyond. And that's supposed to be a representation of what it looked like.
By the way, if you look at the map of the plantation, you can see that all fields where slaves worked were outside of the little village. And of course, there was a swamp with alligators. And we were going to this building. We did not know what it is. The map says that it is a barn and in parentheses stable.
Slaves plantations in those days, the larger ones in particular with many slaves, were like little towns because the slaves had their own children and families and the extended family of the owner and so forth and so on. So they would tend to have their own church, their own graveyard, and just basically it was a little functioning society.
Probably it is the
I'm not
church.
sure what this is, but it looks like it might have been a barn. Let's see, you're about to tell us. Oh, this was where they did the sugar cane. This is where they had the sugar cane press and the distilling going on. They would press the juice out of the sugar cane and boil it down to make molasses, which was their form of sugar. And this was where that happened. It looked like it was also the church, maybe. I don't know.
And the walls, I think, are original.
Oh yeah, I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Look, Hap, look, they made from
Seashells. Let me tell you, this might have been used for making sugar cane, but I believe that this was also a church. Let me look. Notice it's built as a cross. You notice that? You're standing on the top of the cross. Here are the two arms of the cross, and there's the foot of the cross.
maybe.
Now, I don't know, it may have been just a barn or sugar cane plant, but it looks to me like at one point it might have also been used as a church.
Look, Hubby, come here. Plow.
What? Just
Oh,
a plow?
the old plow.
Uh-huh.
And look at this. What is this? I am wondering what.
It had, I suspect it had something to do with making cloth from cotton. Like maybe string the cotton, you see?
Maybe.
I don't know, that's a guess, that's a wild guess. It had something to do with making cloth out of cotton. I don't know. I don't see anything in here that really tells you what this.
The sign said that at slave markets, very valued were following people: field hands, carpenters, blacksmiths, and cooks, because it is what they did at the plantation, any plantation.
No, it doesn't say anything about what this building was. It's a sign next to the slave camp that says you're leaving the world of the owner and entering the world of the slave. This was a very warm climate, abounding with mosquitoes, which are exceedingly annoying at night. Large alligators, which are often seen creeping around here.
Of course, alligators are here everywhere. Now we are going to the slaves area, right?
Yeah.
Where slaves lived. Actually, it is pretty far from the owner house,
Yeah.
not near.
These were slave houses. If you look closely at the construction, you can see that the principal thing holding them together was seashells. These houses were made out of something called tabby, which was like a mixture of things, with the primary strength being given by seashells, and then some kind of binder, I don't know what that was, to keep it together. But that's what they made their houses from. Oyster shells, sand, and water.
Oyster shells, sand and water, this is how they made it.
Mm-hmm. It's a form of concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And these were slave houses, and actually
It has 2 rooms, look.
2 rooms. Not
Probably it is a bedroom and little windows, so alligators will not get in the house.
But I sincerely doubt that this nice brick fireplace was here in the 1830s. But it might have been. It might have been, because I don't know why you would have added it afterwards. So maybe it was.
Maybe it was here, this fireplace, who knows.
I found the old picture. Apparently it was the fireplace and the stove for families.
And everywhere you can see small holes, probably windows, and even from one room to another. But what was this? It was a window as well, or I don't know. Let's look at this house. Does it have a fireplace?
Yep.
Yes. This means all of them have fireplace. This means it is from 1830, still here. And all of them are identical.
It is how the houses looked outside that time when slaves were here.
That house is different.
They all had them.
But this house is different. It is not.
It's
It
smoother,
made
isn't it?
from. It is not from
I don't know why.
seashells. It is like, I don't know what is it.
Built later out of mortar or concrete, or I don't know what.
Concrete or cement. It is obviously the window. The view is nice when it's there.
The literature says that these are about half of the number of cabins that used to be here. There were, I think it says 32 cabins
32?
and 60 some odd slaves. In front of you are the remains of 25 cabins, the homes of 60 to 80 men, women, and children. Of course, Kingsley owned many acres and many plantations, not just here, but he owned another half dozen or more plantations. So he owned many more slaves than the ones that were here. But the slaves that Kingsley owned came from the following places in Africa that you see here on this map.
Look how interesting it is. Half of the, some part of the house inside is
They've plastered over it.
smooth.
Yeah. Huh.
They put some, I don't know, clay or what it is. And outside, seashells. Look at this big tree. It is very old, but I don't know if it is 200 years old. But apparently other trees are not 200 years old, and that time there was an open place here, and maybe there were just field with cotton or tobacco.
America has always had a tough time dealing with the history of the slave period, and it affects the United States in many, many, many dramatic and profound ways all the way up to this day. And when you come to a place like this, you get an idea of where many of those controversies and feelings come from. And so it's I guess it's no surprise that we're still wrestling with this 150 years later, because it's such a monstrous thing to enslave human beings. But we have to at some point come to grips with it, both black Americans and white Americans, and get past it and put it in the past, which to this point we have not been able to do. So let's hope that there's a time when we can do that, and it truly will be history instead of current events.